Korea best not make any more threats to the United States. They will be met with fire, fury, and frankly, power, the likes of which this world has never seen before. And it's about time that somebody stuck up for the people of this country and for the people of other countries. If anything happens to Guam, there's going to be big, big trouble in North Korea. Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself and for his regime.
Critics knocked him for his tough talk, and they claimed the president's rhetoric on North Korea could lead us to war. Boy, were they as shocked as the rest of us by the breakthrough that no one saw coming, the prospect of a peaceful resolution to the nuclear standoff. Kim Jong Un is now willing to meet in person with President Trump for talks, and this is, in fact, a stunning development. Here's more from Secretary of State Rex Tillerson.
I think this was the most forward-leaning report that we've had in terms of Kim Jong Un's not just willingness, but his strong desire for talks. So I think it was really what changed was his posture in a fairly dramatic way that, in all honesty, came as a little bit of a surprise to us as well, that he was so forward-leaning in his conversations with the delegation from South Korea.
It will take several weeks to agree on timing and location for the talks, but the president said it will happen by May. He is, of course, winning some unusual praise from critics, but there's also plenty of skepticism about upcoming sit-down. Okay, skipping you, Greg. Okay, we're going to listen to this. Go ahead.
That would be going down as a great president, and there's no way around that.
Why has no sitting American president ever met with a leader from North Korea? Why has that never happened in all the decades North Korea has existed as a nation? Why hasn't any other president ever done? Should I take that to mean that this might be a particularly risky or even an unwise move?
There's a better chance that a meeting between Kim Jong Un and Donald Trump could actually be successful.
This is a breakthrough and a significant opportunity for us if we play it right.
It's not just about Donald Trump, it's about Moon Jae-in.
Kim Jong Un is getting something that his father and grandfather wanted, the optics of sitting down at the table as equals, face to face with the president of the United States, in this case, Donald Trump.
Okay, Dana, so do you think that the president is getting, appropriate kind of evaluation and consideration for the steps that he's taken that have resulted in this historic outcome?
On balance, I think so. I think he's getting, I would call it a net plus in terms of coverage for him on this, with a little dose of skepticism, not about the president, but about Kim Jong Un, and appropriately so, because in 1996 and in 2005, they tried the same thing, not exactly face-to-face talks, but they wanted talks in exchange for something. And in this case, it seems that depending on what Kim Jong Un actually does, they might actually get nothing for it, right? They want the talks for what? They're going, supposedly, he says he won't do any missile tests between now and whenever this meeting takes place. And we haven't heard other things from Kim Jong Un of what he would want. Now, that said, it is a different situation now than 1996 or 2005 because apparently he does have nuclear weapons now. So he comes to the table in a much different position. But I think there's no doubt that the president's stance and his willingness to be really tough. Plus, if you look at, there's always been this thing that Kim Jong Un was worried that he would become Saddam Hussein. And there's a reason that Gaddafi turned over his nuclear weapons because they realized that America was not going to put up with it anymore. But back to your question, is President Trump getting enough credit? I think so, and I think that also he can't worry about it too much because leadership is doing things that might not necessarily be popular at the time, but looking back could be very popular. For example, when he said fire and fury back in, I don't know, when was that, last spring, and he was at Bedminster, and there was a huge firefight about that in the media, like, oh my gosh, it's so bellicose and he's going to lead us to nuclear war. Well, actually looking back, and even in Vanity Fair and the New York Times and several of those people there, Panetta and Brennan are all looking back saying, it's actually worked in getting to this point. So I think on balance, he's getting enough credit.
Yeah, and
if that's what the goal is. The goal shouldn't be necessarily credit. It's the outcome, which is denuclearizing North Korea.
Absolutely. So, and that's the intended outcome and perhaps the eventual outcome. But nevertheless, if you look at the time frame here, Congressman, this is quite quick turnabout for President Trump coming in and being able to achieve this kind of diplomatic, accord in terms of being able to sit down with him, to discuss this, and to do something that benefits not only the United States, but, the rest of the world.
It reminds me of what Ronald Reagan did. He took this doctrine of peace through strength, and I think Donald Trump laid down the line real early, earned a reputation that he was willing to do what it took to protect the United States, protect Guam and the allies that we have around the country, or around the world. And I think that's paying off in great dividends. And it did happen fairly quickly. There are going to be a lot of gyrations, and if they delay the timeline or whatnot, but we need to let this play out, because President Trump has put us in a position where we can actually prevail and make the world a better, safer place.
Okay, Greg?
Well, obviously, if this were Obama, they would already have demolished Mount Rushmore, and they'd put 4 Obama heads right there. I want to hit the point about the optics. They say by elevating Kim, the optics he's getting something for nothing. It may actually help Rocket Man, but why wouldn't he do it? The point is, that's going to be part of the deal. He's going to be in a deal that is going to probably help him survive. But in order for this to succeed, we have to be super skeptical, and we also have to make sure that there is restitution for Otto Warmbier, right? He has to be part of this equation, and President Trump has spent a lot of time with Otto's dad, so I'm pretty sure that that's going to be part of the deal. They should find out what happened to Otto. They should find the people who were responsible for that horrible, horrible treatment, and they should punish him. I think that's as big to me personally. I know it may seem irrational as making sure that there are inspectors there to look at their nukes, but I think it should be part of it, because you can't let him get away with that. But obviously, the sanctions worked, and the sanctions worked because they're I would call the sanctions the Trump handshake, right? It's the handshake that doesn't let go and just gets tighter and tighter and tighter. I'm going to coin that the Trump handshake, because it can go on forever. There's no end to these sanctions. If you can always make them worse. And I think they're realizing that this isn't going the way they want to go. And also, he targeted companies, which is I think is pretty new. I mean, you target countries, but you target their companies. That's kind of interesting. But I am skeptical. But I will also say this, that it's an interesting contrast between how Republicans do foreign policy and Democrats. Democrats are like the single parent, but Republicans are like both parents. You've got the carrot and the stick, and Democrats always think all they have to do is yell "world peace" and it'll happen. No, you actually need a carrot and you need a stick, and I think Trump has been really good at wielding that stick.
Okay, Juan.
Well, I'm just puzzled because, I think what I heard was rhetoric that was threatening, hostile, and made people fear that President Trump might, in fact, decide it was time to do a unilateral strike against North Korea. I don't think it led to this. I think what led to this was the South Korean president actually taking the risk of coming together and saying, you know what, we want to reunify. We want the peninsula to be one. Why don't you North Koreans join us at the Olympics, march in with us, let's talk, let's have some talks. Remember, there were going to be talks between Vice President Pence, who went. Those talks broke down, but the South Korean president did meet. Today, you have a situation where Rex Tillerson, our Secretary of State, says, as you saw at the start of the show, it's a surprise to us, speaking of the Trump administration, that you get Kim changing his posture in this way. And today at the White House, Sarah Huckabee Sanders was kind of unsure, saying, oh, you know what, we want to make sure that he is going to, as a precondition to any talks, denuclearize first. And then other people said, oh, no, they agreed to have the meeting. But Sarah Huckabee Sanders' statement made it seem like we're not quite sure about this. And then Tillerson said, sitting down to talk is not negotiation. So I think to myself, the way that we're casting this conversation is big win for Trump or not. Is he getting enough credit or not? And I'm just thinking the real issue here is, how do we deal as a country with North Korea, and are we doing so effectively?
But the South Koreans were the first ones to say it was the presence of Donald Trump and the position he took that led to this position. And Obama's policy of appeasement was getting us nowhere other than going backwards.
I don't think it was appeasement. I think, in fact, if you go back to Republican administrations, if you go back even like to George H.W., then Clinton, then George W., and then Obama, all of them have tried in some way to make a deal. It's not, I think, their failing. I think it's the failing of the North Korean regime to hold to their word. And their word was, you know, like with the six-party talks, or we're going to make a... They always lie.
But you know what you did? You actually kind of like, you nailed it by mentioning all the past presidents. This one's obviously different. We actually are the crazy person on the street for once. And that is working. He is unpredictable. You don't know what he's going to do, and unpredictability is a great card to have in your hand. If North Korea finally was facing somebody who might actually nuke you, that's a first. They didn't expect anybody else to do that, but this guy might actually do it, and they're thinking, you know what? With the way the sanctions are going, the way they're going after companies, this guy, it's not going to end well for us. And it may still not end well for Kim, because the other thing we're not talking about is, and I disagree, Juan, I'm not presenting it as good for Trump or as bad for Trump. I'm worried about the people in North Korea because they still got, we still have to address that. I mean, if they're still starving, do we want to say it's a great, it probably is better for the world that he's denuclearized, but what about them?
I just wonder if it's the rhetoric. I mean, everybody seems to be saying, oh, because Trump had this bellicose rhetoric, that shifted Kim's posture. I don't know that. Apparently, neither does Rex Tillerson.
But the South Koreans,
what they said was...
The Koreans say that at the White House in order to, I mean, we know.
Yes.
It is, all of it is a piece of something.
A part of the equation.
We know why. Except for there's one other thing that I think we don't know a lot about. And Dennis Wilder was on the 2 o'clock show today, and he said that the Chinese have done something that have changed the way that the Kim regime is able to use currency. And that is, I don't really understand how all that dark money stuff works, but basically, if the regime doesn't have a way to pay off the generals in order to keep them in line, then he realizes he's going to have to do something. And they have a South Korean president now that they did not have during the Obama administration, who is much more willing to say to the North Koreans, let's try to work this out. And it just depends on who you end up with. And right now, what we've ended up with is a president who is willing to do what it takes to stop North Korea from having a nuclear weapon. And you have Kim Jong Un squeezed enough that he's figuring, well, let me try this gambit and see if I can get him to the table.
He's certainly unconventional in terms of it, his approach, but I think it is part of the puzzle and the piece that has worked here, because it certainly
it's the only thing really different
in terms of what you look at.
It's also different that he has a nuclear weapon now.
Yeah,
that's
that too.
Different
and then I also think there's the China piece in terms of their influence behind the scenes and putting pressure.
Will Dennis Rodman go?
I hope so.
Because he
could be the secret weapon.
All right, let's not dumb down the segment.